Good evening. Number 871 is on the air. This is the pre-show. It is a magical, marvelous time of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time, we say really outrageous things. So it's the Monday night weather party, and obviously a lot of things to talk about here tonight. So we're going to get things all set up here and get the embed code going, and then we'll get this thing shaking and baking here. Hopefully you've had a good day. Obviously we have a hurricane in the Caribbean. And anytime that happens, life gets about 7.3% more interesting for people in the weather business. And we obviously will be talking about that this evening. And let me really quickly be sure we can embed the video here. Once we get that set, we'll invite everybody and get everybody on the show here. All right. Again, this is for the 26th of September, 2022. Tropical season is coming alive. All right. Yeah, then again, the weird thing about this, when you bring up a live stream, by default, you cannot embed the live stream. And it seems like it would be the other way around, where the default would be that you could do that. And I have looked and looked and looked and looked and looked and cannot find a way of doing that. So excuse me while I allow embedding. And again, they take it on the local television channels here, our digital weather channels. And, actually it came up with allow embedding by default for a change. All right, so let me check it real quick and be sure that it's good. And it is. How about that? All right, well, everything just worked. Now let's invite everybody to get on the show here. And I think most everybody's going to be on here with us this week, and that's good. I just got a note from Mr. Bill Murray to send him an invitation through another email address. So I will do that. All right. Well, it's interesting. Here it comes. We do this show on Monday, so weird things happen on Mondays. And I am not at the TV station tonight. How about that? Which is a bit unusual. It's a long story I'll share here in a minute. Let's see. Get everybody tuned in here. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, Bill's over there. Hey, man, I haven't gotten your invitation yet. And I know it's 6:58. I'm like tardy here. Got to get James a lot. I think that's everybody. All right, invitations have been sent. All right, now we'll get them on here. I'm anytime you see me with a green wall back here, I'm at the house with the main production switcher. The TV station died. I mean, it is at the end of life. It died. And this was one day last week. I can't remember which day it was, but I typically do a segment on the morning show. And I got a text from our morning meteorologist who's at the station, and he said, "You will not be doing a live segment on the morning show today because we are not on the air." Because, they came in and the switcher wasn't working. So they had to run the national news feed that morning. And since it's been down, they have been switching all of the newscasts from a satellite truck in the parking lot. Yes, we got all these cables run from the building through a garage door out into the truck, one of the trucks in the parking lot. And it's a nice little switcher out there, but it doesn't have obviously the same kind of capacity that your main production switcher has. And so and I do a lot of user generated content, a lot of specialty things. And to make it easier, I can actually do it easier at home compared to the TV station. So I have been doing the weather from the house, I want to say since last Wednesday. But rumor has it, James, that our switcher is back online late tonight. So I think I should be back in the building tomorrow. You ever had your main production switcher just die in the TV station? I mean, wow.
Absolutely. Audio's died at a different time than the main switcher, and it is not a pretty scene. Single point of failure.
Yeah. But that is so, and again, it's nice that it's out there. It's like Apollo 13 going to the moon, that they got in the LIM. That was their lifeboat. And for us, our lifeboat has been that satellite truck. And it's a new satellite truck. They really don't roll these trucks anymore because we use live views now. But it's got a nice switcher in it, and they ran the cables out there, and that has enabled us to be on the air with local news and programming. But again, for what I do all kind of odd things that they don't do in the news business. So I've just been here at the house, and on top of everything else, we're short staffed. So it's like I've worked this weekend, and I did the weather live Saturday night at Bryant-Denny Stadium, which was an adventure from the Alabama Vanderbilt football game. And because the two problems there, number one, drunk people screaming at you, because where I am on a bridge that connects the west side of the stadium to the north end zone. And there's a ramp, those big ramps that go up to the top of the stadium. People are walking up the ramp. And the news Saturdays at 6:00, and the kickoff was at 6:30. So they were walking up there, and you never know what they're going to get. I mean, somebody might moon you. You might get some really bad F-bombs. I mean, and so that was one potential point of failure for that. And then the other is the bandwidth. You got 100,000 people in one spot, and even with the extra capacity, you never know. And it really worked out well because I had two MiFis with me, one 5G and one regular one, and one of them dropped, one of them died, but I had the other one. So anyway, we made it. So it's been an adventure. All right, enough about me. It's 7:01. Welcome to our television audience. Are we all here, Bill?
All except for the guest.
Oh, yeah,
that might help.
He just tried to join the Zoom that I did a test with him today. He probably was getting nervous, so I just emailed him again.
I see Troy, so I think all of our people are all here.
Most of the bad language at the OU Kansas State game was after the game. Just saying.
Not at my house.
All right, let's see. I got problems.
Lots of that from Austin too. I think similar language in Norman and Austin.
This is just terrible, this email problem. Apparently it's taken down all of WeatherBrains, the Weather Factory, everything. Because
what's the email problem? I'm not aware of one.
Trey's shop.
Oh,
kind of problem that happened about 4:00. All right, let's see.
Good old fashioned Gmail. I got a good Gmail address. I'm just jspan@gmail.com. It's like tcook@apple.com. Yeah, I got it so early. I could have just gotten span. I didn't. I just stuck JSpan on there. Old Shoe told me about it. He said, "Hey man, there's this thing called Google. They got an email service. You really ought to get an account." And of course, as usual, I thought John had lost. What Google?
It's a fad.
Yeah, it's you kids. It's a fad. But that was a good one. All right. And you know what? To be sure I'm wearing pants here. See, when you're home, you never know. I have been known to stand up on the morning show segment that I do, and I'm not dressed appropriately. So I am wearing pants, which is a good thing. Ooh, and we got Monday Night Football, I see again. I guess ABC is going to run Monday Night Football every week. Apparently, there's a game on ESPN and there's a game on ABC. So go back to the late night Monday night thing. But the nice thing about this, even if you're late, to go home, you just walk down the stairs and I'm home. I'm here. All right, Bill, do you want to start the show anyway? We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I know. Doggone it. This is really perplexing. James, I'm going to put an email address in the chat, and if you will send it out.
Okay.
Let me do that real quick.
While they're doing that, it's good to see you, Troy. I feel like it's been forever since we've gotten to spend time with you.
It's good to see you too, and hope your family's doing well.
Yeah, thank you. How's everything going over there? I'm really impressed. Your bookshelf is really coming back into its form, and everything after it's been a year and a half since the debacle.
The next step will be involved the half-size dumpster, which I'm going to put in the driveway in a few weeks. And I'm going to see about getting books to people who might like to have them, but I'm going to be cataloging.
Don't you throw away anything I would want, Troy.
I know, Bill. I'll have you come over and hang out with me.
Anything with a teletype in it or anything like that.
No, Bill, you know what I need from you. And, I had never thought about anyone here. And Rick, I mean, you're a young man, but still, I am looking now for a Weather Service manual that would have the old SAO codes in it. I need to see, instead of the METARs, which we brought about in 96 and 97, I just want to see a Weather Bureau or Weather Service publication, an operations manual for surface weather observing that was in the SAO format.
Bill, by the way, Chad is here.
Okay,
yep.
Good.
Hey, Chad.
Hope he stays.
Hey, Troy,
buddy.
Troy, can you tap your mic and be sure you got the right audio source?
Mic check.
Yeah, I think your internal mic is your microphone. You might want to.
I bet you it's that silly thing up there. Let me go here to
change the selection of that fancy high-tech mic you have there.
Oh, you're right. Actually, it is. There we go.
Now.
Oh, yes. Oh.
Never mind. You know where I was going.
Yeah. All right. Let's get this thing started here.
These mics.
All right. So channel 1 and channel 2. And here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
According to Bill Curtis, we're kind of a big deal. Welcome to WeatherBrains, episode number 871. This is the weekly show all about weather. This is for the 26th of September, 2022. Hurricane season waking up. Obviously, we'll talk about the tropics tonight. Troy, is that a belly laugh from you?
Yeah, it is, because I just saw, courtesy of at the WFO at Key West, they just issued the first LSR for tropical storm force winds 3 miles east-northeast of Key Colony Beach in Monroe County, Florida. So that's the first LSR that I think that the local storm report I've seen out of Key West so far.
Yeah, we'll talk much about Ian. Dr. Neil Jacobs, we'll talk a lot about Ian and modeling with you. I can't wait. We have many questions for you, the czar of numerical weather prediction for the world.
Of the world.
Did Neil hang up on us?
Nope, I'm here. How's my audio?
Sounds clean as a whistle. Sounds great.
It's been a while since I've used this mic. I'm back in DC for the festivities this week.
All right, awesome. So again, we have many questions for Neil. Let's see. James A is in Tulsa in the studio.
Are we calling him Harry James?
Harry James.
Yeah. I wonder where we
Harry
got
James.
That. Yeah, Harry James. Yeah, Harry James.
As long as you call me for dinner.
Versus Ball James.
Classic line. Let's see here. Jen, how are you doing? You've been busy.
Oh man, it's been busy today. I have 3 Florida stations that I cover, but we have several more as a company. So it's just trying to make sure we get our messaging out in the short amount of time we have to get it out. It's hard when you have, 15 seconds to try to get your words out. So it's just, what's the point? What am I trying to get out for folks? And most of what I have is in the Panhandle, so I can talk more about that later. But yeah, it's been a kooky day, that's for sure.
I have total trust in you, Jen. I know that you'll get it done and you'll get it done right, because you always do.
You're my favorite.
Yeah, we're gonna block out time and give Jen all the time she needs to talk about the hurricane here. I mean, we can stay. We got Monday Night Football. We can just stay up all night and talk about the hurricane.
I don't know what to do with myself. I can only talk in 20-second segments. So
you don't have the 20 seconds here. You got plenty of time.
Oh, thanks, guys.
So Kim, how are you? How's that baby doing?
Baby's doing great. I think she's the only child that's not screaming right now. So that's pretty awesome. I get to come back here and just have a little bit of like quiet respite and just listen to the crazy out there. And I don't have to participate. This is one of the most relaxing evenings I get all week. So yeah, things are going all right over here. And
guess what, Kim? That'll continue only for 18 more years. So
if I'm lucky, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I hear this parenting thing is kind of a lifelong gig. So we're ramping up for it, adjusting. Everything is going really, really well. Thank you for asking.
But remember, when it comes to raising children, the days are long, but the years are short.
That's true.
Enjoy them.
How profound.
Enjoy them. You blink and you'll be at their high school graduation. You blink, you'll be at their wedding. It just kind of goes by fast. Rick Smith, you know how that goes, don't you?
Yes, sir. I typed in the chat 18. I mean, we're into the 30s with 2 of our kids. More so I'm looking. I don't know what y'all are talking about. But, no, it's absolutely right. I mean, it's the time literally goes by in a blink. So it's enjoy every second of it, even though it doesn't seem enjoyable at the time.
Honesty.
Yeah, our first child was born in 1984, and that just boggles my mind that this child is going to turn 40 here in a few years, which is just insane. But Bill Murray, would you please bring in our guest before he runs and bails on us? Go.
Yeah, James. Tonight's guest weather brain is the suggestion of Anna Wolverton, who used to work with Chad, and sent a very, very nice note. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But our guest weather brain tonight is the Science and Operations Officer at the National Weather Service in Jackson, a position he's held since 2015. He's been with the Weather Service since 1999, and we are very lucky to have him with us tonight. Chad Entremont, welcome to the show. Now, or should I say, is it the French pronunciation, Chad? Would it be Entremont?
You nailed it.
So I don't know which one I should use. I'll just call you Chad the rest of the show.
Oh, absolutely.
I mentioned this note we got from Anna Wolverton, who used to work with you, and she said after our 728 show that we needed to have you on to talk about, warnings and philosophies because of the outstanding training that she received when she was working in the office there with you. And she said, training sometimes is something that you dread, but in the case of the training that you did there at the office with your forecasters, it was something that made them better every year, and that's really outstanding.
Well, it was very kind of her to say that, and I mean, that's what we're tasked with. One of our main priorities, right, is to, issue watches and warnings and warnings really to save lives as much as we possibly can. So the only way you really get good at it is if you practice, and, it's a very complex kind of endeavor we do, right?
Well, take us back to your background, because there's usually, incidents or events or things that spark an interest. Did that happen for you, or was it something else that got you into weather?
Yeah, so it was Hurricane Andrew, 1992. I'm from South Louisiana, so we were impacted by the second landfall, and I was just always interested in any kind of weather. But being in South Louisiana, hurricanes, tropical storms, had my share in the 80s and early 90s for sure, but that just really got me interested. And matter of fact, in Hurricane Andrew, the strongest tornado from that hurricane was an EF3, and it passed about a mile from my house. And come to find out later, Dr. Fujita actually did that survey. That was probably one of the last like really detailed surveys I think he ended up doing in the early 90s there. So I didn't know that at the time, but I knew the tornado was pretty intense.
How old were you at that time, Chad?
I was a junior in high school. So.
Yeah, so that was a real formative time there. So how did that change your career trajectory at that point? Were you already deciding to be a meteorologist, or did that evolve
really,
from there?
Yeah, I was thinking about it more, but it really solidified that was something I wanted to do for sure. But really at the time, I didn't know where to go, really who to contact. Essentially, I started sending letters to TV meteorologists around, and they pointed me on what university to go to. And I ended up at Northeast Louisiana University. Now it's ULM, but it was NLU at the time.
And so talk about your journey after that, how your career evolved and the rest of your education, all that stuff.
Yeah, so that was in the middle 90s, graduated in 1998. Rick probably remembers this. There was a hiring freeze in the Weather Service. I think it was the fiscal year of 1997. So that was kind of not great news when you're, an upperclassman in college. And it's like, well, they're not hiring if you want to go into the Weather Service. But, our professors and the folks that were giving us the information, like, well, it's not going to stay like that forever. So, but that was a little discouraging for sure. But eventually they said, stick with it, put in applications and really talk to people. That was kind of the big thing, kind of learn how to fill out those applications. Because I think the first few you do, you really don't know what you're doing when you're trying to answer those qualifying questions and things like that. And ultimately I got on with the Weather Service in 98. Actually, I started in Houston. So, and the time in between graduation and that, I worked for a private company. So I was always being engaged in, some kind of weather professionally once I graduated. So in 1998, started down there. It was this weird, position where they were temporary, not to exceed 12 months. Again, Rick probably remembers that right about that time. So once I started in Houston, the MIC was Bill Reed. And I was asking him, it's like, I'm not sure about this temporary, not to exceed 1 year thing. And he's like, well, they're not going to get rid of you. But if you want to kind of pick and choose where you want to go, start applying for those that are permanent. So I did. So I didn't get just stuck in a place I didn't really want to, and ended up in Jackson, Mississippi. Then like a year later, I actually was in Birmingham for a year. I was like 2000, the back half of 2000, early 2001. So that Tuscaloosa F4 in December 16th, I was there for that. And then I had a chance to come back to Jackson in the latter part of 2001 and been here really since then. So
I bet we can get you and Span started on that Tuscaloosa tornado talking. James Span, you remember that day well, don't you?
Oh, I have a few memories, yes. Actually, having memories of that Laplace, Louisiana tornado from Andrew. I got a story about that one. We'll tell those later. But I know that one very well. I was there. I was like almost in the middle of that thing.
I want to hear it. Let's hear the story, James.
It's embarrassing. So it's like that was a bad tornado. It was bad. I mean, the damage was bad. You know what I mean, Chad? I mean, it was bad. And so I decided we're going to pull the satellite truck and get a live shot out of there during the eye was coming through. And just don't do that. That's not a good decision for anybody in television. That there's nothing good about that. But I was being aggressive. Back in those days, TV people were really aggressive, and we took a lot of risks. And I thought we could get a shot up for the morning show. But the back edge of the eye wall came in right as we were trying to do the live shot. And we had to get out of there and drive back to New Orleans. And the satellite truck died on Interstate 10. It was a series of disasters, but we did get great video, and it was a very bad tornado, one of the worst tropical tornadoes I've ever seen.
Hey, Chad, how close was that to hitting the McElhaney Tabasco sauce thing? Because that's an important part of my life.
All of our lives, Harry James. So, Chad, any stories from that tornado or from the tornado in Tuscaloosa when you were at the Weather Service in Birmingham?
Well, the Hurricane Andrew one for sure. Like I said, I was probably a mile and a half from it. That's where I grew up, and I grew up in Reserve, so that's the town right next to Laplace. But when that outer band was moving through, I actually jumped in one of the vehicles, a truck my dad had, and had to go run over to my grandmother's house to get some more hurricane lamps. And I was out in the middle of that crazy, intense squall. I mean, you could not see, I could barely see the lights in front of me. It was so intense. It was crazy. And it wasn't until, gosh, that was probably more like 1 or 2 in the morning that we knew there was a tornado that went through. And I was just listening to some like CB radio stuff we were able to get and pick up. It was crazy because once that thing, well, before it hit, the power was out. It was just pretty wild. And we didn't get to really see the damage until the next morning. But yeah, that was pretty intense couple hours that evening, and the whole night was just kind of wild.
Yeah, I guess. Is that in Southern Terrebonne, Chad? Is that where?
No, it's in St. John.
Laplace is in St. John the Baptist. So, yeah, we spent a lot of time down in Homa, and always we're hearing about all those places down there, Golden Meadow, and all those kind of places in Southern Terrebonne. I guess they're still there. They're slowly washing away with time.
Well, all the storms that have gone through since, there's a lot of damage down there. It really doesn't look the same. I used to do a lot of saltwater fishing in the marsh down there, and it's just kind of going away. Too much saltwater intrusion and not enough Mississippi River sediment to replenish it, really. So it's definitely changing down there.
Yeah, that's some sad stuff. So yeah, I'll never forget that December tornado in Tuscaloosa, because we had a hotel that was right in what I thought was the path. It turned out to be a different hotel at a whole different exit. And John Olshew, our colleague, was desperately trying to get into that Hampton Inn as that tornado approached, and it very nearly was a very tragic situation. Probably tragic for the van, James, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that van, and what happened, look, Sean would tell the story if he was here, but John was watching in the van our live feed of the tornado off this tower cam. And he was just so enthralled with it, as we all were, but he honestly forgot where he was in relation to the tornado. And he realized, uh-oh. And so John and his photographer had to run into the Hampton Inn there to protect themselves, leaving the van out in the lot out there, which did not fare well, as it was, picked up, spun around, and tumped over by the tornado. It was but we're just glad John was okay, and Sorrell, his photographer. Mm-hmm. That was a rough situation.
So Chad, talk for a minute about your job. We've had a lot of Sues on, but it's always interesting to hear their take on the role, and tell us about a typical day for you.
Yeah. So it's a lot of interacting with operations and kind of really setting plans up, how you want to train and how you want to expose the forecasters to something new, so they can always, kind of hone their skills. Right. And that's always kind of a challenge to just come up with something new. Because you really want to simulate kind of the training, kind of, you want to train how you fight, so to speak. The problem is that's a bit of a challenge to kind of get a past case to work just like, a real time case. So trying to mimic that is a bit of a challenge. And we got a lot of ideas and things to work on that are starting to be put in place to help that process. We're just not there yet. You guys may have heard Sue's talk about the weather event simulator. It doesn't really work exactly like a real time case. But ultimately, what I try to tell any forecaster, and especially new forecasters, is the best recipe is to always look at radar data and try to think about decisions you would make. So just trying to get them accustomed to doing that. When you have some free time, really just go load data. It's a lot easy now with GR Analyst. You can get the archive files, load them in, and just start doing a lot of analysis, ask questions to people that may know. Ultimately, that gets you to get better and better because it just gives you reps, right? We always talk about the better you get, the more practice it takes. And that's just a way to do it. One of the best ways really, really to do it. But other than that, I mean, I try to come up with, situations and pose questions to, newer forecasters and folks wanting to do the, work the radar and issue warnings, really kind of get in their mind about what's the decisions they're making. So that's part of the process. Now that's not every day, of course, but generally you try to do as much as that as you possibly can. One of the other big things is really exposing, forecasters to, new technology and getting them to understand that and build some trust with the new technology. Because for the most part, everything we get that's new, the new tools to issue warnings, issue forecast, to issue outlooks, we're trying to message people to get them mostly situational aware. You need to leverage that new technology or new ways of doing it. So it's trying to put that information in front of them and building that trust, really, because ultimately they won't use it or use it well if they don't trust it. So it's just a lot of talking, a lot of discussions and those kind of things.
Hey, Chad, you and Daniel Lamb did a neat study several years back about TDS height and correlating that with tornado intensity. And sneak peek, that's one of my pictures of the week, but we've used that a lot real time here. And one thing that I have my team do is use GR and follow along as things are happening real time elsewhere, because it's incredibly good learning opportunity. But your paper was kind of neat for me, because that was kind of a little bit of, yeah, sure, the updraft strength is going to loft debris higher, but the fact that you put it together in that quantitative manner, and then the breakdown by QLCS tornadoes and supercells and things. So I just wanted to see if you would talk a little bit about how you guys conceptualized that study. And then it just sounds like a whole lot of data to grind through too.
Yeah, and it was. But so going back, you got to go back to probably 2011. We were just starting to get access to some dual polarization radar output. And we had, the 2011 super outbreak. But there wasn't many, radars around. One of the main ones was Armor. But of course, you had mobile Doppler radar, some X-band radar, but we always never have access to that and really to look at it. But we did have Armor. So like a year later, there was, of course, plenty of presentations and research done, early on about the 2011 outbreak. So I got to talking with some folks that were showing this debris height from the correlation coefficient from Armor radar. And they were talking about some storms that were out, towards the Alabama, Mississippi state line. They were lofting debris well over 20,000 feet, some of it 30,000 feet. And we're thinking, it's like, there's something to this where, a really intense, violent tornado lofting debris so high, it has to be some kind of, correlation to intensity. And also knowing that, hey, you hear about stories where debris is deposited many miles downstream, from these violent tornadoes. So we just got to thinking about that. A little bit of time passed. We're starting to learn more about dual polarization, because the 88D fleet is going to be upgraded, fairly soon, to dual polarization. So we got to thinking, and we started getting our hands on some of the radar that was in the test. I think it was OUN. That was a radar that was being tested in dual polarization, and there were several tornadic events across Oklahoma under that umbrella that started doing that. And then there were a few more radars coming online. So we started just crunching numbers, coming up with, the warning decision training branch had some rough guidelines on what was a debris signature and some certain thresholds that you needed. So we were looking at some other things. We were like, well, you can't just go by CC alone. You needed, a reliable signal. So that's where it comes with, you need at least, 30, 35 dBz or higher to have a really reliable signal, along with, velocity couplet and the lowering of your correlation coefficient. And then the ZDR part is more of a kind of a bonus. It can just quantify that, hey, yeah, that's definitely debris if it's approaching, something closer to zero, like 2 or -2, something like that. But we started crunching a bunch of data, and sure enough, hey, there was a signal. So you start breaking it down further with supercells. So storm mode, right? Supercells versus QLCS, and then EF scale, and then you can start seeing that, hey, there's definitely a signal in there that's useful. And all about that same time, there was the push where, hey, we're going to take our warning text and come up with these we called them these tags, but they were to start differentiating, how strong a tornado may be. And you can say that in the warning. So they had your regular base tornado warning, then you went considerable if it was going to be an EF2 or greater, and you had some kind of competence. And then a considerable catastrophic was like your tornado emergency. And offices were doing tornado emergencies before, but essentially up to that point, we really didn't have any tools to really help us like differentiate, the intensity of the tornado. You had an idea, well, if there's really intense rotation, the odds of it being a stronger tornado were increasing, but that's all we had. So getting the dual polarization data and looking at the TDS height really was the first big step in helping to say, hey, real time, it's not very predictive, but in real time, I have this debris being lofted to a certain altitude. And now I know from just this data set we crunched, at the time, it was probably up to about 400 or 500 cases. And the signal was telling you the odds of it being a strong tornado were, definitely more likely when you saw debris height, around 10,000 feet or higher. And especially we broke it down for, to the catastrophic, which was a tornado emergency. So that was the main thing. And then, of course, the best thing, it's not always perfect. So there was other research done a couple of years later about, rotational velocities. So you can start honing it in a little bit more. And the good thing about using rotational velocities is now you start to have like a predictor. So you can start to leverage that data before even the tornado may have formed, or right when it's early stages, it's when it's forming. You can get an idea of how intense it may be, in the next 10, 20, 30 minutes or something like that. So,
yeah, we actually have some of your graphics laminated at our key wall just for such an emergency. I shouldn't use that tag, but
yeah, we keep them as well because it's always a good quick reference. And anytime you have new staff come in, I mean, they may not be as as up to speed. So always something quick and kind of dirty to look at is, it's really important because I think we all know how stressful these situations get, in a warning environment, especially when you start to have significant tornadoes or potential for significant tornadoes. It's just really stressful. So the more simple you can break it down, so these quick decisions can be made, the better it is. And I think that's what we attempted to accomplish, and I think we did that. Like I said, I think it's still used today, and it's a little more sophisticated. There's some other GUIs and slider bar things we can use to make it a little bit easier, and there's more information kind of put into it. But it's generally accomplishing what we wanted it to do.
It's a great tool in the toolbox.
Yep.
Chad Troy here. I'm horrible with dates, but I just remember that Sunday afternoon. Can't remember the date, but I remember it was a Sunday afternoon around Mardi Gras and the Hattiesburg, Mississippi tornado. And what an impressive job that National Weather Service in Jackson did on that day. And that was relatively early in the use of dual pole, wasn't it?
Yeah, you're right. It's funny you pull up that day. It was seemed like that was 2014.
Yeah.
Yep. In like early February, like February 12th, 14th, somewhere around there. So the funny thing is about that, you're right, it's very early. The week before, we did an emergency managers workshop, and we were telling, we'd already come up with those graphs, or at least a first rendition of that. So we had felt really good about what we were, finding. We wanted to share that with the partners that, hey, you're going to start seeing us use this kind of wording in our warnings, and especially in the NWS chat. We're going to be typing that stuff out. We're going to be trying to blow by blow explain that. And so we presented that to them. They had some questions, and funny, the emergency manager down in Forest County, asked the question. He goes, "Well, you guys' radar is kind of far from us. So if you're going to see a debris signature, what you thinking?" We all kind of laughed, and because he asked that question, right? But it's like, well, if we see it from our radar and it's down in Hattiesburg, it's going to be strong because we're high off the ground point, and so we kind of chuckled about all that. And lo and behold, a week later, they get that tornado, and like you said, we were utilizing that information to kind of spread that. I mean, we actually went with a tornado emergency then. So
yeah, you did. Yep.
Yeah.
And Chad, that tornado hit on a Sunday afternoon. I think it was fortunate, if I recall. I remember that video very well. It was shot. A lot of people shot video that day of that tornado as it moved through Hattiesburg and the University of Southern Mississippi, which, if I remember correctly, was actually, I told my college students in class, Chad, that they apparently get out of class for Mardi Gras the first part of that week. And on that Sunday would have been going into that holiday. And how many deaths did you have in Hattiesburg that day? I don't think you had any.
Right. None.
There were none. And I'm telling you, I believe you go back and look at that event, go look at that video, and you see what a great job National Weather Service Jackson does, and Chad and his group of colleagues there, because that was very impressive, especially early in to the dual pole stuff. It was an impressive job. I'll always remember that day watching it from this desk.
Yeah, and it was a testament to the staff that took that kind of training. We were covering that information, because you want to check those charts, but really you want to have experience doing it. And we did that leading up to that, practice cases, and tried to prepare them. And sure enough, well, unfortunately, you don't want a big tornado going through any part of the area, much less a town. But we had that, the opportunity, but that situation presented itself. And I do commend the staff. They did a fantastic job identifying that and getting that message out. It worked out as it did.
Amazing video. Again, it kind of, to me, that video kind of matches up with the video, James and Bill, that we saw at Tuscaloosa. But to see that tornado going right through the middle of Hattiesburg was still, to this day, I can remember that video. Impressive. And job well done.
Quite a tornado history in Hattiesburg too over the years, don't they, Chad?
Oh yes, it wasn't but 3 or 4 years later we had another one. That was at 4 a.m.
Yeah, I remember that one well too. So, Chad, are you using your TDS data directly to decide on the tags that you put on your tornado warnings?
Yeah, absolutely. We do, and we practice, several times a year on that. Because the tags are important because it gives information, but we also worry about, well, you want people to take cover when there's a tornado warning. But, we also ask the question, and we work closely with Dr. Laura Myers. Kim knows her very well. And we wanted to just get an idea of, well, what do people do when you give them tornado warnings and you give them these tags? And we found out early on from some surveys she was able to do, was what people actually take the biggest initial action on is when you say confirmed. So the tags are important, but really the biggest jump from the base tornado warning to when people really take action was when you added that word confirmed. So we stress really hard about identifying a debris signature gives us that information that's the most important as we take it, to tell people, hey, this is confirmed. Either by radar or, of course, by spotters when we get that. But that's that validation, and that's a huge piece of information, to pass on in that warning process, is that confirmed wording.
Yeah, Kim, do we have any empirical information on how many, what the percentage penetration of that tag information is to our citizens?
Goodness, I don't know that off the top of my head. I know that there have been a couple of studies that have tried to look at the dissemination rate of the various tags, but those have all been a couple of years old at this point. So I'm not sure that I would quote those numbers now. But one of the things I was saying in chat, commenting on what you just mentioned with what Dr. Myers found, it goes along really nicely with some studies that I have done and others have done, where we're looking both in the real world and in simulated experimental micro world decision scenarios, where people just really want the likelihood that there's a tornado, period. I think that we understand that people are wanting impacts information generally to make decisions in a lot of different kinds of threat scenarios. But for tornadoes, they know what the impacts are, and they're really just worried about any tornado pretty evenly. So when it comes to motivating protective action, just go for that probability information. When you're looking at confirmation, that is a kind of likelihood information. You're telling them there really is one, at least in this moment in time. And that's extremely valuable. It's really neat to see that your office, I feel like your office has been very proactive too, in being very interdisciplinary in part. And I'd love your thoughts on this, Chad. Your office has one of the most difficult tornado problems in the country. And the warning decision making there is almost storied, because you've had to battle with these very difficult environments to discern tornadoes in, and very vulnerable populations. I'd love to hear you just talk about that a little bit. I'm sure that study was really important for you in trying to make that balance work well for your citizens.
No, that's a great question, Kim. So we were, even before the tags came out, we were doing, there was a process. I think it started with the Norman office from the Moore 99 tornado emergency. So we took that situation, that case, and we were issuing tornado emergencies as well. But we didn't have the tags. We didn't have all that. But ultimately, as that stuff evolved, and that process evolved from really the 2011 super outbreak, what we found was we do have such a vulnerable population that if we felt it was going to be like a high-inch strong tornado, or definitely a violent tornado, we needed to get that emergency word, that information out. And it wouldn't be tied to population centers or anything, because we knew there was vulnerable people everywhere. So we quickly didn't follow, kind of that guideline to use a population center. If we felt it was going to be, a strong to violent tornado, we were putting out a tornado emergency. So that kind of speaks to that part. In terms of like philosophy and putting warnings out, yeah, there was a period where there was a lot of warnings, severe warnings, tornado warnings, and just looking at it over time. Now it's an evolution from the county-based warnings, from how we started, in the 70s and 80s, and especially in the 90s when we transitioned to, hey, we're going to do these polygon warnings. So there was a period of time where there was a big shift, and that polygon warning change happened in the late 07. So after looking at a bunch of warnings and data and trying to make apples to apples out of it all, there was definitely a peak where there was a lot of warnings, through the middle 2000s, up to probably 2011, really. I don't know if you can consider 2011, it was such a hyperactive year that it may just be something that's a little skewed, but still there was a very increased period of overall warnings. So we were looking at ways to, hey, how can we reduce this really high number of warnings, but still continue to, provide the service and accurate kind of warnings and that kind of information. So after looking at that, we ended up coming up with like a philosophy, so to speak. And it was not always to reduce the false alarm, but it was just to hone in what we could do better. And ultimately, one of the most simplest things was to issue longer warnings, not to do 30-minute warnings, to really hone in on that 60-minute time frame. Now, we still did 45 minutes, but we really like to do the 60 minutes. But the argument would come from others, well, you're keeping people in a warning for 60 minutes. Well, my argument back is not really, because we're going to do statements and updates very frequently. Our plan is to do that every 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes. Usually if we're waiting 20 minutes, we're not doing them fast enough. So that's the goal, is to do them very quickly, because what that's going to do is going to remove the back end and give that all clear, which is a very important message, is to give an all clear. You're warning people in the head, but you want to tell them, hey, you're okay on the back end. So as long as we're doing that, the longer warnings are really not a big problem. So what that does when you go longer, it reduces the stress on the radar operator. They don't have to sit there and make decisions every 15, 20, 25 minutes. They have time to kind of relax, make decisions, and do a lot more analysis, and then make decisions based off that more sound analysis. They can also put that increased messaging, right? Those tags, that kind of information. You can hone that in as well. You can also, in these updates, your pathcasts are a lot better, your timing of those. And we've heard from partners, they really want to know, well, the most important thing that we issue for people and when hazards are coming is what, when, where. They want to know when this will hit. And, you know, it may not be the most precise time we give them because we're limited by the text, right? But if we can do updates, we can always keep that location and that timing as accurate as possible. So just a combination of those things. And again, when you do longer warnings, you're issuing less of them, because ultimately what your warning is, you're warning for the threat area. And if you can continue to keep that, you know, as things progress into it, then provide updates as you need them, cancel things as you need to. That always works out the best. And over time, and we really started kind of hammering that in that philosophy, you know, after the super outbreak in 2011. So it was a lot of 2012 to 2014 timeframe, and we saw a drop off in the total number of warnings and our overall statistics. If you want to look at statistics as a metric, and I think we all understand that's not the whole thing anyway, but it's just something to have a measure. They really improved. And then you talk about kind of the weather scenarios we get, supercell, discrete cell environments versus, you know, the linear, more messy QLCS situations. So one thing that we really adopted right about the same time is the 3 ingredients method, and understanding the role of like low-level shear orientation to the QLCS and to the updraft on a linear system. So once we started really getting a better understanding of that, we were really warning not on these circulations. Of course, there's always a circulation that triggers, you know, a warning, but we would warn on the favored area that a rotational couplet would form in. So they may be a little larger, but what we were doing is issuing 1 or 2 warnings for a particular area instead of chasing all the circulations where we may have issued 5 or 6. So that also reduced the number of warnings as well. And I think, as everybody knows, the challenge and the intensity in terms of just the cadence that it comes when you're dealing with a QLCS and mesovortices that spin up along a QLCS, that's really intense, like warning decisions and trying to orient polygons a certain way. So if you can reduce the stress in those situations, the warning operators, and the overall outcome is going to be better. And we didn't just say that, oh, this is a good idea. This took some time. This took some years. And we were talking about this with our partners, especially with the media, because we wanted to let them know, hey, this is our process and how we're going to warn on this. So we need you to know so you can express that while you're on air. And if we issue a slightly larger tornado warning for a QLCS, there's probably going to be 2 or 3, maybe even more circulations that form within it. And what we're going to do is describe where these are and concerns about certain ones. We're going to do that in the chat, and they can go ahead and see that and then message that, you know, on air as well.
That's so interesting to hear. I will say, for the at NSSL, when we look at the Southeast offices and the warning performance in various regions of the country, it's not gone unnoticed that one of the ways that you have been able to bring your performance metrics up is to make warnings longer. But I hadn't heard that explanation before, that was something that you feel that you're doing to complement that you're increasing your communication in other channels. So not just relying on the warning itself to do all the work, you're looking at these other informal communication mechanisms with your partners. And that's really, really interesting. I will say, from the social science perspective, we're a little bit agnostic to, is there, to the answer of the question is there a perfect balance here? I think that it's tough because you don't want to miss an event. You don't want to have a fatigue of warnings being too long or of having too many warnings. And this delicate balancing act is very, very tough. I feel like in almost no place tougher than where you are. So it's really interesting to hear that feedback. And thank you for offering all that insight. I know there are a lot of people queued up here. I'll toss it over to James for now, but I might follow up with you in the future. I know there's some folks I work with who are very interested in that perspective. So just thanks for that.
No problem.
And something that you touched on with Kim's first question about people wanting to know probability. The other communication, whether it's directly to somebody in the public getting that info, but to me, one of the most important things that information does is change the intonation of the broadcaster, if he's doing it or she is doing it correctly. Once I see that in chat or I see that tag on a warning, then the whole messaging gets a lot more serious and critical and almost stern in a way. But I think people pick that up. And I know Kim and I have talked briefly about it. I did a very small study for my master's thesis just on Oklahoma residents, and they all wanted to know when. In fact, different phrasings of the same question of when were the top things
Sure.
that people wanted to get out of warnings and broadcasting.
And I'm glad you brought that up, the when, because I think there's a bit of a push. It's like, well, we don't want to say when because we're not going to be precise. But what I've heard is that the precision really doesn't matter. People understand it's not going to be that precise. And they give you a 10-minute cushion. I mean, you probably, no matter, if you're doing it the right way, you're going to be within 5 minutes with the system and how we do it and all of its limitations. But still, you're going to be that close. And for people, that is close enough. And they'll probably be okay if you were just 10 minutes off. You hope you're not that far. But still, I think we don't give ourselves enough credit and probably don't provide the information in terms of time-sensitive locations when things may arrive, because we're maybe overthinking things.
Yeah, I think it's great when I try not to be in other offices chat much, but I see Norman and Tulsa a lot in chat will directly discuss upgrading probabilities here or changing this to tornado or considerable if one is occurring. And that messaging to EMs and broadcasters, I think, is critical.
I agree, because you're right. I think it does help change the tone of the purpose of the person disseminating it on whatever media they're doing it, and people pick up on that. I've had situations just talking to partners over the phone and leading up to a significant event, and they talked about it after when we had conversations, saying, no, I caught the difference in your tone when you were describing something, and that was very important to me, and I knew it was going to be a very serious situation, different than sometimes in the past. So I'm very cognizant of that. And I think you hit on it too. I think people just that are listening to any kind of broadcaster in terms of what they're trying to message and tell folks about, they pick up on that.
Chad, with a lot of folks that watch the podcast and a lot of people that listen, as James points out to us, I think it's interesting, and I want to make sure that we can communicate to people in many ways. You and WFO Memphis and Birmingham and places like that have particularly tough situations sometimes. If nothing else, 40-foot pine trees are your enemy in a sense, because it cuts out on visibility. People can't necessarily, it's not like a tornado in Oklahoma that you see 20 miles away. And that sort of thing. I wanted to ask you this, and Kevin Laws from your colleague over at Birmingham had told us this on Alabama, and I may be asking something unfair for you to come up with at this point, but in your CWA, what percentage of people do we kind of estimate live in mobile homes? Do you have any idea?
I couldn't put a number on it, but I've seen some maps and diagrams. I think it's very close to Alabama.
Okay.
It might be underneath the percentage in terms of the number,
Right.
but they're comparable in terms of what you're asking. Yeah.
James Spann, what did Kevin tell us there? And you know this in Alabama, what percentage of people live in mobile homes?
Away from municipalities, it's almost 70%.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's one of the things that we have to tackle. And Chad, from what I understand is, and this is what we heard from Kevin as well over in Birmingham, that the event comes and goes. You can go back and look at it. But my understanding is, Chad, that you go back and really look at all events and to see what you can do better. And this is something Kevin told us about in the office in Birmingham, that you really go back and look at it and say, okay, how could we have done this a little better, and have discussions with that about that. I admire that.
Yeah, no, we do. And sometimes they're challenging discussions, but we need to have those. We always say there's certain rules when you have these kind of meetings, and sometimes there's, challenging questions to answer. But, I like to tell everybody, say, I love you all in here. This is for us to learn and all get better. And it's not pointing fingers at anybody. Another thing too, what we do in the office is, even though there is somebody pushing the button on a warning, the decision and that whole process is not really made by one person. It's a whole team effort. There's usually always going to be the person pushing the button, but there's going to be at least one or two other people part of that conversation to make those decisions and help out. It's truly a team effort. And of course, the bigger the events, the more people there and are contributing to those decisions. So that's one thing that is important. It's not always just one person, pushing that button. And you brought up I wanted just to go back so we didn't pass this up about that percentage of mobile homes and people, being vulnerable because of the structure they may live in. One thing that we are finding out is there's a bigger push for those folks to get information in advance. And what they're doing, they're leaving. They've been listening. It seems like over the past 5 to 10 years, the outreach that we're doing about it's not safe to be in a mobile home, plus the outlooks that we're putting out, these watches that are being put out well in advance, that people are saying, well, when I get, 3 days away, I know there's going to be a severe weather event. It looks pretty nasty. There's going to be a lot of severe weather. There's going to be tornadoes. So then they're waiting for the tornado watch. And then when they get that, they already have a plan to leave. They go to some family member or they go to community storm shelters. We're starting to see in our forecast area a lot more community shelters.
Yep.
And most of these are in bigger cities, and Hattiesburg is a perfect example. Whenever they get a watch, that's open, and there's always quite a bit of people that show up there. But that's starting to pop up in a lot of areas, and we have stories over the last couple of years. I think the most recent one was last year. It was an F3. I believe it was the March 22nd. It was the first. We had a series of severe weather events every Wednesday or Thursday, right? It was like Severe Weather Wednesday. And it was like that for 5 weeks. I think it went all the way up to Easter. And the very first event had an EF3 in Kemper County. It didn't last very long. There was a period where it did reach peak intensity of EF3. Well, there was a mobile home. I think it was 2 of them. Both were unoccupied, but we were able to talk to people that did the survey. Were able to talk to the residents because they came back. And what they did is they didn't come back that day. They were going to be going out of town, but they knew there was going to be severe weather, so they added an extra day to their stay and didn't come back. Once the day they were going to come back was the day the tornado hit. So there's things like that. And it seems insignificant, but no, not really. They were aware multiple days in advance, and they changed their plans, which ultimately saved their life.
Chad, one other question, and this I've mentioned this before on the show. I'm glad to see the state of Mississippi. Ricky Gibbons is a friend. He's emergency manager up in Alcorn County, and that's up in Memphis's coverage area up there. But I can tell you, in the Alcorn County, they're very proud of these community concrete rebar above ground shelters that they put in. And I'm really, really glad to see. It seems like a focus on the folks in the state of Mississippi to do that. And I'm really, really happy to see it.
No, absolutely. And then, like I said, there's stories. It's these efforts are paying off by saving people's lives because people are listening. They're doing what they need to do.
Hi, Chad. I wanted to go back to what James A. talked about a little bit in terms of our tone as a broadcaster and how it changes some. He mentioned the word stern. I've been told I'm very motherly, so I guess that does fit because my tone does change to whatever there's an observed tag or, it looks like the rotation's tightening up or whatever. But so when it comes to the regular tornado warning, then what should our tone be for that? Because it seems like sometimes that we get the tornado warning and it's that prompts all of us to go, whether you're on radio or television, that prompts us to go wall to wall. And so what should our tone be? How do we discuss that? Where we keep people's interest and we're trying to tell them what's happening and that, we may not have confirmation now, but to me, it's like it could happen at any point. So there still should be an urgency, but are you fearful that we're losing some of the urgency there? And what should our tone be?
Well, I think you hit on it. The tone. You do your best to make it urgent, serious, because it is, and you described exactly what it is. You're trying to get ahead of it. You don't want to be putting warnings out and using a tone or saying information when it's actually occurring. You're trying to be proactive, so people they have time to be ahead of it. So, but you're right. I think we've definitely created something that's not ideal when you start breaking down these different levels, because just human nature. When you break the levels down, someone is going to say like, well, that's not as important as this one. That's a level 2 or a level 3 kind of warning. So we definitely created something that's adding more of a challenge.
Chad, do you change your messaging at all when you have an out of typical setting tornado event, like a holiday when people aren't normally plugged in? We talked about Tuscaloosa tornado, or maybe out of your really painfully prolonged severe weather season, because that can be, people just aren't thinking, they've got the intellectual bias that they don't have to worry about severe weather this time of year or on a holiday.
Well, ultimately we try to be consistent, because you when you talk about if it's a moderate risk or you're talking about the potential for strong tornadoes, you want to be consistent, from time to time. But when we do our partner briefings, or especially in our forecast discussions, that is an opportunity to draw and point out some different kind of circumstance. In nighttime, the main part of a particular event is probably going to be in the middle of the night. So there's some extra things we like to talk about when it's like that. So that's somewhat of a different kind of tone. The other thing is people are very keen to the way storms move. They come from the Southwest. So if you have a situation where your storm motions are going to be more west to east, or especially northwest to southeast, we definitely going to start talking about, hey, the storms are going to come from a different direction. And there's still tornado potential. So we try to highlight that, because people are aware, it came from a different direction this time than I'm used to. So they may think something's different. So yeah, we try to bring to light those situations.
Chad, I want to hold our place here for just a minute. Hope you can stay with us. When we think Jackson, we do think severe weather. You have other things, floods, winter storms, hurricanes. We want to get into all that a little bit more too, but we've got Mr. Hurricane with us, hurricanetrack.com. Mark Sudduth, who tonight is traveling in South Florida as he works on his landfall project there. Mark, we're real thrilled to have you for just a few minutes while you're driving there. Are you heading over to Naples? Is that what I understand?
That is correct. And luckily, I am being driven by that fine man right there, Mr. Matt. But yeah, we're driving. We're actually just getting into Naples now. We handed one of our camera systems to our colleague, Marcel. He is a hurricane researcher from Brazil who's up in the United States the last few years studying hurricanes. And he's going to take one of our remote cams down to Key West. We're going to get some sleep tonight here in Naples and be ready to really get to work tomorrow, setting up a lot of equipment to capture what happens with Hurricane Ian.
We've been following the progress of the hurricane, of course, as it's developed over the weekend, Mark, but the scope of it is beginning to look very frightening. Talk about for a moment the field down there and your thoughts on what the hurricane's going to do.
It's hard to get a read on the field down here yet. We're going to definitely see that tomorrow. As we're in the area, in the Southwest Florida area, more. We're just now getting into the region now. Saw a little bit of traffic today. No runs on gas just yet. But the thing is, I think overnight tonight, it's going to eventually cross Cuba, maybe tonight into tomorrow. The models are beginning to, especially the consensus, really focus on that this could make landfall as a significant hurricane in an area that is very vulnerable to storm surge. So I think tomorrow is going to be that wake-up call that, oh, this is going to happen. It's not going to be a false alarm. And oh boy, here we go. And it's going to just ratchet up real quick because a lot of these people have zero hurricane experience because they've either missed or they weren't what they thought. This could be the real deal.
And I'll kind of open it up to all the other panelists too, but a storm going up the west coast of Florida like this as a Category 4 hurricane is going to spew impacts over a very wide area. Talk about the difference in that, Mark, and one that's coming in more perpendicular to the coast.
That's right. And also it is going to be slow moving. And that is hugely problematic because it just compounds the situation for potentially 30 hours or more. It is already raining up here. Some sort of like out in the front, some bands have developed as it started to interact with the trough. So it's already wet. I spoke with Dan Summers, the director of Collier County Emergency Management, a good friend of mine, just a few minutes ago. And he said that the water district here in Collier County has really done a lot to bring the water levels down in the canal system here in anticipation of what could be happening with potential surge and potential flooding. But it is the prolonged event and it paralleling the coast, impacting a lot of people. This is, I don't want to say unprecedented. You got to be careful with that, but we haven't seen anything like this in my 30 years of doing this. I'll at least say that. And it's not Charlie. This is not a small, fast moving. It's going to be in and out in the course of an afternoon. This is going to linger. It's going to feel like we've been carpet bombed over here, unfortunately.
Looking at some social media traffic today, it looks like, a lot of people went through Irma back, was it 2017 when Irma kind of skirted the coast, and they're comparing it. Well, we went through Irma in the Tampa Bay area, so we did okay.
Right.
It's a totally different thing. I mean, the water in Tampa Bay was going out when Irma, because, the approach of the storm, the side of the storm that the population is going to be on. This is a whole different thing. And that's always a fear, is people think, well, I've been through a hurricane. I can do this. This is totally different.
And people have this word that they use, they always say this, they always say that, they and thee, or it, they'll say it was supposed to do this. It's funny how they get assigned, I guess these are pronouns, right? And I remember my grammar, and it's like, well, what are you talking about? When they say, well, it's not even supposed to be near here, because they're looking at that little black dot with an H or an M or an S. It's like, no, that's just the center of the center. These effects extend well beyond that. And we try so many things with communication. The National Hurricane Center has a tremendous amount of awesome graphics. The weather news people all around the Southeast, the hurricane prone coast areas have awesome graphics to show. But until you've actually experienced it and you understand, oh, that's what that's all about, you really don't have a clue. And that's what the late, great John Hope said. Until you've experienced a major hurricane, you really have no idea what it's all about.
So Mark, what's your plans at this point? Do you know where you're going to deploy, and what can people do to, be a part of that through your Patreon site?
Well, hopefully you can see behind me. I'm not sure if I'm on, but I've got there's the truck there. All that equipment. We're bringing a whole bunch of these remotely operated camera systems. Some of them can be bolted literally onto the Jersey walls of overpasses, of bridges. And this is our anemometer, arm young. So we're going to get live data, both from the video side. Let's get back in so it's not loud and drippy. We're going to get live video, live weather data. And it's just fantastic because over the course of the 30 years, it's been hard to fund this. But now we're in the age of crowdfunding and social media and the internet, YouTube and Patreon. And so we're on Patreon. And so we don't have an app. We don't have a subscription service. It is a community, and the community, like public radio, supports what we do. Every bit of that equipment that I just showed you was purchased by the people that support the project. And then in return, we give the data to anybody that wants to see it. And, once it's done, the weather data, we share the video with the National Hurricane Center, with FEMA, to help educate people. It's just a remarkable thing that I can do my passion and turn it into something that's actually helping to contribute to the science, even if it's just a little bit. And there's a lot of efforts, different universities, different private entities, other storm chasers that do a really good job in collecting that data. And now with the age of the internet, we can really share it with a tremendous amount of people. I think it's remarkable.
I thought it was so remarkable. I became a supporter because I am a huge fangirl of what you're doing.
Well, thank you.
I started watching your videos, and I have learned so much from you in just the short time of watching. You run a very professional Discord server. I really, really support what you do. And the community is great. And
I agree.
It's amazing what you're doing, and you have the expertise and the experience that we can all learn from what you're doing. And I do want to talk just briefly. If you could just talk a little bit about what are some of the things that you were seeing with the hurricane in terms of, I know that we were anticipating shear and maybe some dry air getting wrapped in there. And I was just curious to know your thoughts of how things are unfolding with it starting to slow down a little bit. Is that going to have an impact at all as it's moving toward the coast, or is the damage done here because it is moving so slowly? We're going to have such a huge problem with surge.
Well, it's been really tricky because, again, we focused on the models a lot, understandably, and it just depends on which one. Like the HWRF, for example, that is a specific model just for hurricanes, tropical cyclones, the Hurricane Weather Research Forecast model. And as an example, the 18Z, I believe today, takes it farther to the north. It weakens it, drives it into that shear, and the drier air gets wrapped into it. And it's really sort of a shell of its former self in terms of wind and pressure. But it still would have a lot of surge impacts, maybe some rain, well, definitely some rain. Whereas the 18Z European, a global model, was more into the area just south of Tampa, and very strong. So which one's going to be right? We don't know yet. And we're only about 3 days till landfall, and we still don't have a real good idea. Is this even going to make landfall proper? And what is the structure and intensity going to be like? Because there's one side, as Jamie Rome said today, the acting director of the Hurricane Center, it is possible, paraphrasing him, that this could be a worst case scenario for Tampa or not. And that's really difficult to wrestle with.
Yeah.
We're driving, so I got to put my seatbelt back on. Safety first, even
Dr.
in
Dr. Neil, you were watching, the modeling over the weekend and had some interesting comments on that. Anything you want to throw out there about the current situation with how the models are handling this?
I think the global models are locking in. The 6Z Euro was kind of a zinger to the west, which spooked everybody. But then the 12Z came back, the 18Z is even more east. That's concerning for a different reason, because then you're looking at offshore winds in the Tampa Bay region instead of piling up the water. When you're talking about the landfall coming in at a parallel angle to the coast, a lateral difference of 20, 30 miles could mean, a 10, 15 foot storm surge or negative storm surge. So, I mean, as far as the models over this weekend, it was pretty interesting to watch the shifts back and forth. They were really struggling with analyzing this upper level shortwave that was moving through Canada. And that was what was sort of the kicker that the Euro saw that was pulling it to the northeast. And the GFS never did see it until the Weather Service started doing those supplemental radiosonde launches. And I think there was some discussion about why are they doing launches, over the Pacific Northwest?
Yeah,
And that was where that shortwave trough was coming through that was going to catch it later. And it's about 1 or 2 model cycles after they started doing those. I think it was like the next 18Z run, the GFS shifted east again. I can't explain what the 6Z Euro was up to, but every once in a while you get a zinger run like that. But I got to give a huge shout out to the folks at the Hurricane Center. Like they don't chase those one-off deterministic runs. They're very steady and consistent. And it's like when you see one like that, you're tempted to change your forecast. And then the next cycle comes and it's right back. Well, there's not a lot of ensemble support for some of those drastic shifts, but I mean, this is one of these things where it depends on what happens after it comes off of Cuba, because that terrain will change around the configuration of the core some. And if it comes off a little bit to the east, it's going to hit Florida a little bit further south. The problem with that is that shear is a little bit further north and higher up. And so if it makes landfall further south into Florida, it's going to make landfall as a stronger storm because it won't stay out over the water and have the shear beat it up, that's what's concerning to me. And the 18Z Euro was coming in pretty strong. I mean, I was probably 10 or 12 millibars lower per same hour. And it wouldn't at all surprise me to see this thing come off of Cuba and just rapidly intensify. So, I've got friends in Brandon and in Tampa, and I told them to get out tonight. If there's they've got no reason to stay there. Why? Just leave.
Right.
There's nothing's going to be going on, but you'll be sitting around with no power.
Chad, Tremont, y'all, you know a little bit about hurricanes. Anything you want to ask Mark or add to the conversation here?
No, not a whole lot. It's been interesting, dude. So, I had to cover a little bit of a shift over the weekend, and I was just talking with the forecasters, and I haven't been following a whole lot of social media. I'm interested to see if there was other discussions going on about the effects of Fiona on the overall synoptic pattern. Because what I was showing some of the forecasters is that as Fiona really deepened, as it became extratropical, it really changed the pattern in the Canada portion of North America. And it was really like a big gyre, but in tandem to what that shortwave coming across Canada had an influence as well. But I think they were kind of in tandem because there was some phasing that occurred with like a spoke of energy from the really deepening of Fiona with that shortwave, which helped carve the trough even more so. So it got, there was more influence of that trough further south, which is kind of ultimately making, Ian turn north. So we were talking about that, and everyone's like, yeah, it actually is a little bit of influence from. So I don't know if people were talking about that, but we definitely picked up on it.
That's the
there
kind
was
of
some
stuff
discussion
you
that
only get here on WeatherBrains. Keep going, Dr. Jacobs.
Well, that's a great point. Like this, so this is one of the problems with some of these limited area models, and they have these lateral boundaries that don't include all that information. Another thing that we were looking at this was before it actually went like extratropical and started to sort of phase with that upper low, but that when it was further lower, the outflow from Fiona was basically shearing what was supposed to be Ian's development. And it hung out as like not even a named depression for a while. And everyone was like, when's it going to get named? And it just kept tracking a little bit to the west, and the cloud tops were kind of getting blown down to the south. And I remember there was an email discussion we had over the weekend about everyone's saying this thing was going to ramp up and be like a named storm the next day. And it took like 72 hours. It was mostly from the outflow from Fiona.
These people are sharp.
Mark Sutter, how
on
can
it.
our people support what you're doing and participate?
You know what? The easiest thing is, share what we're doing off of social media, the Twitter, the YouTube stuff. Get those algorithms to work in our favor. But if they want to be a sustaining supporter, I want to get behind what we're doing here. Then they can go to Patreon. A lot of different, Weather Nerds is on Patreon. Levi Cowan was able to upgrade his servers there, Dr. Cowan at Tropical Tidbits, because of crowdfunding. It's just a remarkable thing. So it's patreon.com/hurricane track, or you can just get the Patreon app and search Hurricane Track. You get access. I just hate pitching it. That's the hardest part. But
that's all right. We'll pitch it for you.
Well, it's like Jerry Maguire with the help me, help you. I'm not trying to be a millionaire here. I just want to be able to do my job and have the best equipment and the best people available to do what I feel like I was put on this earth to do, besides raise 7 children. So we're in that age of crowdfunding. People can help make it possible if they're able to do so. And then look, I know not everybody can. That's why we make our YouTube feed public. We don't hide everything behind a paywall. This is not supposed to be about that, but it's a great way to fund it. Very much like public radio. It is member supported, and we are very proud of it. So it's Patreon/Hurricane Track. That's us.
Yeah,
and
we
thank
want to
you.
remember all these websites that we think are free are not free.
Right.
And
even the Weather Service is the biggest crowd-funded site out there. It's called Our Taxes.
Yes.
Well, Mark, we'll let you go do your work. We appreciate you joining us on short notice tonight.
Oh,
Please let
thanks
us
for
know
asking.
how we can help, and
Great.
we'll be watching your video anxiously.
Very good. I appreciate it, you all. Take it easy.
Careful,
Thanks,
Mark.
Everyone,
Thank you.
Mark Sutter, outstanding. James, do we need to take a recorded break real quick and then come back and ask Chad a few more questions? Chad, can you stick around for a little bit?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I think we should do that. It's still, I want to back to Neil real quick. Neil, that 18Z Euro run. How credible do you think that possibility is? Just real quick, out of curiosity.
I'm waiting to see what the ensemble says before I. It's to me it makes more sense than moving west, but that's only because there's some other support with the GFS and the GFS ensemble. But that it's even with a deterministic model, you don't often see the Euro at that forecast horizon make a shift that large. But it's the last couple runs have been kind of back and forth. So it's struggling with something, which is curious because it's usually locked in by now. The GFS has been pretty consistent. So, I mean, we'll see.
It's like you. I've not seen this much inconsistency at this range. And that OZ run of the Euro is odd. There's something going on here that I don't understand. And if anybody in the world does, it's you. So if you, go, Chad.
Yeah. So I think what it may be, I had some time to look at some things when I was at the office today. So the representation from almost every model I saw, high res, global, once it gets a little further north, what are we probably right at 48, 50 something hours. So the dry air from this front that we're seeing across the South really starts to wrap in, and the response from all the models to really erode the Southern and Southeast like precip shield. It becomes very lopsided from just about every guidance. The precip shield starts to be focused up on the north and even northwest or west. So it really is going to expose, at least that's what the models are showing, and that's kind of what I see. So I think maybe some of the models, especially the Euro, when you expose that southern side, what is the dynamic response to that? Is it going to want to, drift a little bit more east? I've seen that with some of the landfalling systems over the past couple of years, when they get really exposed to the south or southeast, the center, it does change. It shifts a little bit in a more eastward direction than kind of the consensus did, over time. But again, a lot of those were still inland, so you had some frictional effects. This would still be over water, but you may still have some effect of that. Dr. Jacob, who do you think?
I don't know, that the frictional effects always sort of fascinated me, because you'll see these really well-formed eye walls hit the like land and just jerk to the side, which it almost feels like it's like a tire, like getting traction or something. I don't know. It's a great question. I think that I would like to think that a lot of the obs that the high altitude hurricane hunter was trying to collect, they did a whole bunch of dropsons into one of those bands, and I'm guessing they're probably going to go out there again and do some more sampling. If that dry air gets pulled in there, it's definitely going to distort. It's not really the angular momentum, but it kind of appears that way in the rotation. But I think it just basically shifts all the convection to the other side, because the wind's basically pushing it. I don't know. I think, what I think would be cool is if, especially with these extra radiosondes and the dropsons, if there's any students out there that are looking for a cool project to do for a thesis, do some data denial runs where you withhold these obs and see if you can either correct or replicate some of these track shifts back and forth, because it's probably going to be traced back to one or two different observations that are causing these models to go all over the place. But it'll be pretty interesting to see where the origin of the differences is.
So on a practical point, Neil, before we take a break, a lot of people listen to this show, and let's say that they live in Tampa, St. Petersburg, Bradenton, Sarasota. What's your advice? You earlier said your advice is to leave. Is that for everybody?
I mean, if you don't have a good reason to be there, and you're under the warning area, I would get out. I mean, if you're not in the warning area, then it's probably not worth clogging the roads, because other people are going to wait till the last minute and try to get out too. I mean, that was one of the Hurricane Center's biggest concerns, particularly with Dorian or something that comes right up against the coast, and everyone who was south, who was going to be fine, wanted to panic. There's only one way out of Florida, and that's driving north. But if you're in the warning area, like I've got family that lives in Tampa on waterfront, and there's no reason to stay. Just don't take your chances. You're going to put more people in harm if things go bad, having to call in rescue or whatever. So that, that would be what I would do. I've sat through many hurricanes, including Hugo, and I'll never do that again.
Yeah, to me, the worst part, Neil, is some people might not have power for days, if not weeks after this.
It's that was my, that was the worst thing when I was in Charleston when Hugo hit. We didn't have power for 3 weeks, and there were trees down everywhere, and it took about 4 or 5 days just to chainsaw out of the neighborhood. And so you don't have water, you don't have. I mean, it's hard. You don't have electricity. So unless people had gas and a lighter, they weren't actually able to boil the water unless they could start a fire. People don't think about a lot of this stuff. You can't pump gas because the gas stations are powered by electricity for the pumps. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that it's just not worth the risk unless there's some compelling reason that you need to stay there. Which in case emergency managers and folks are doing their jobs, but otherwise just leave.
Yep. So there you go. Practical advice. So let's take a quick break. We're going to go to Tony Rice. We're going to come back with some email. We'll do picks of the week and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
You might have noticed what looks like a bright star in the eastern evening sky. That's Jupiter. And it's at its brightest this week because it reached opposition or directly opposite the sun in our sky. Opposition in 2022 is even closer. because it occurs close enough to perigee, or that point in Jupiter's not quite circular orbit where it is closest to the sun. Jupiter's actually closer than it's been in 59 years and won't be any closer for more than 4,300 years. And even then, it'll just be 437 miles closer. That's not a lot when you consider it's over 367 million miles away. Yes, I did all the math. That decreased distance does a lot for how bright something appears. The equation for apparent brightness takes the light energy being emitted by the star, or in this case, reflected by the planet, divides it by the square of the distance, so further away objects get really dim really fast. Think of this the next time you're looking at a bright star like Sirius in the constellation Canis Major, or the Big Bear. It's more than 8 light years away, yet it shines as the brightest star in the night sky. That's a pretty bright star. Elsewhere in the sky is our own star, the sun. It's spinning 12 hours above the horizon, or close to it. While last week was the equinox, this week is the equilux. If you're in Canada or the northern half of the United States, your equilux happened on Sunday. It's Monday for the middle states and Tuesday for more southern states. For more on why this happens several days after the equinox, check out last week's podcast. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me in RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
All right. We got to have some email. I have a funny feeling we do have some email this week.
All righty. So I'm not exactly sure how to move in this direction. So it's kind of like a big mess of topics here, but we had a couple of emails that came in, and James, I'll bring you into to kind of talk about what you sent. But there's been a lot of discussion about the hurricane, and just an increase in hate on social media, and just people just really struggling with communication. And so and trying to, and the trust of us who are trying to disseminate information. But we did get an email from Stephen Duke, who goes, I saw this Twitter thread and I thought you all could have some fun with it on the show. So we'll just start there, from the Twitter account of Cat Turd, and who has well over 800,000 followers. And I'm not going to go through the entire Twitter thread because I can't say all of the words anyway. But essentially wrote a thread about how we are, we don't say the category of the tornado. He did a graphic here from one of the local TV people and said, we don't know the category when it comes on shore. And so we're holding that stuff back, and it's all political. And so we're kind of, holding back information and blah, blah, blah.
Cat Turd does graphics?
with all respect to Mr. Turd. I mean, with all respect to Mr. Turd, he's probably getting at a germane question, Kim. But there's no other way to show the Hurricane Center, category intensities on the track map other than the way that television station did it. But, I get what he's saying, but you could discern what the intensity is going to be at landfall, but it takes a program like HurTrack or something, and that's just an extrapolation at best, right, Dr. Jacobs?
My mind's wandering with this whole Cat Turd graphics package. We need to know if they're using like NCL or Gimpack or Grads or what.
They're using a graphic from a TV station. That's what they use.
Oh.
So they took that and said, they don't tell you what category it'll be at landfall to hype it up to be more powerful for clicks.
Because it showed like it was, like a 3 before land, and then it was like a 1 after it made landfall. And they're like, they're hiding information. Who in the world is hiding any information on this hurricane? It scares me senseless that we're passing around this disinformation while people are making life or death decisions on the Florida Peninsula tonight and this week. And it's just terrible.
Yeah, I hadn't realized that Mr. Turd had 800,000 followers. That is, there's nothing, that's about peak 2022, I think, right there.
Yeah, but according to Elon Musk, at least 60% of them are bots. So
I don't know you'd get that many with bots, but yeah, there are a lot of bots
Good.
out there. I
Good bots or bad bots?
right. Initially, when this email had come across, my impression had been, there are people. Social media is just this diaspora of commentary, right? Like you don't know who it is who's giving the commentary behind that screen. It could just be some individual who, has a fringe belief and is no one that you would actually listen to in real life if you knew who they were, and knew their level of knowledge about a particular topic. But yeah, 800,000 followers, that's disconcerting that they're giving that opinion. I mean, the thing that's so interesting to me from a behavioral science perspective is that the way we're trending with improving individual decision making about forecasts and risk situations is to give more of that uncertainty information. And people just really, really appreciate that they're inferring uncertainty if we give deterministic forecasts. And so they kind of know the game. They know that there's uncertainty in every parameter of the forecast. And when we can actually give them an estimate of what that's like, then they do better than if they have to infer it for themselves. But this comment was really sort of scary because I think, on one hand, they're judging us for giving some of that information and also hedging toward worst case scenario messaging. That's something that is very common to do in especially hurricane situations. Some of the information that's put out by the National Hurricane Center is end user informed. So they did research with users like emergency managers, found that they wanted the worst case scenario forecast attribute. And that's the stuff that goes out, like for the storm surge product. That's a reasonable worst case scenario product. And what this person is saying is, this is something that I think is overhyping, or, there were cases where I hadn't believed you because there'd been so much hype. And then, oh gosh, then we were devastated. There's a suggestion here that maybe people from event to event aren't really following the arc of our development very well and are making a set of inferences we know very little about from event to event. So I was interested in his perspective. I wasn't very worried because I didn't think this was an influencer, but they clearly have that kind of sway and power. And I think that it just reinforces to me, we have so much yet to learn about how people are accessing forecast information, making their decisions about it. And man, these single points of influence where they just don't have that grasp of what the whole story is, but they're putting out this kind of messaging. It's frightening. And it definitely isn't helping us.
And you're right, Kim. You heard him say in there, that he didn't evacuate for Michael because all the other storms had been hyped so much. There was no way that anyone who was really paying attention to weather could have sat there for Michael to come up. I remember writing, the night before, just these frantic blog posts, hoping somebody might hear it in Panama City or Mexico Beach or Apalachicola or any of those places, because this was nothing to mess with. And I'm beginning to feel that way about this hurricane this week. And I don't like that feeling.
Well, I will say it's brutal out there. I'm out there maybe more than anybody else on this show here when it comes to a social media footprint. I've been threatened 3 times, with violence.
For what? What did you do, James? You said it wasn't coming to justice.
And part of it's this political extremist stuff. These right wing and left wing extremists. Some on the right perceive me as part of the mainstream media, fake news. We're hyping everything to promote climate change. We are, left-wing lunatics, and they're going to go listen to their right-wing, source. And then the left-wingers are just frantically mad because there's some suggestion that it might weaken before landfall. And everybody knows that, these now always rapidly intensify. We've never had a hurricane in late September like this before. This is historic. This is unprecedented. This is a climate emergency, and you're not being serious enough. You're attacked from all sides, these left wing and right wing extremists. And then you're attacked from the social media guys, the social meteorologists. Some guy said, blood will be on your hands, you MFer, because this is coming to Mobile Bay, and you won't say it. You're hiding it. And it's like, if you guys could only see the stuff I see, and my colleague sent an email that I shared with the group here. I worry about the mental health of people that are doing weather, the practitioners and the low levels down here, because of these brutal attacks we get where, come on, man, if you read the stuff, all right, it's the most laid back, straight shooting stuff you're ever going to see here. And that's obviously not working anymore. So people are going to go seek whatever they're looking for, whether it's right wing, left wing, whatever. And I hate that this weather and all this stuff has been politicized. And I
got a Sharpie for that guy in Mobile. That's the only way he's going to get a hurricane.
And the problem is they will attack your family. They come after your spouse and your children and whoever else. And some of you on this show have been under attack, and you know what I mean. And it ain't fun. It's not easy, and it wears on you, even if you've been doing this for a long time. And so it's a really harsh environment for those of us that are right with the people every day. And I try and be responsive. Since we've been on the show here, I've probably gotten at least 100 private messages on Facebook asking questions, and I'm honored they came to me. I will respond to all of them. But Jen, I didn't mean to hijack your segment here, but I'm just saying it's rough out there. It's rough.
I wanted you to say something because it's so infuriating, and I hate that this is happening. And where do you think, when you look at Mr. Cat Turd's, trail here, and you try to.
I'd be Mrs. Cat Turd.
It could be, let's just call it Cat Turd and just whatever. That you read that there's obviously a distrust. That's huge. And is this more than not what's happening now? Why do they not trust us anymore? Is it trusting meteorologists? Is it just trusting anybody? It's so. It's just.
I honestly think, Jen, they think that if they're a right winger, they think we're left wingers, and if they're a left winger, they think we're right wingers. I think politics has a lot to do with it. It's crazy. What in the world has politics got to do with weather? Please.
Right.
It doesn't have a lot to do with weather, but it does have a lot to do with how people manage risk about the weather. And I as we're talking about this, I feel like maybe things have changed a little bit and gotten more intense because we've been through 2 years of this pandemic. Absolutely. Where what to do about the threat has been extremely politicized. And I think, we're coming to a point where there are just very divergent views about how we should message about risk. And there are a lot of people who are very just sort of saturated with the whole thing. I can't help but feel like we are entangled with some of the broader things that are going on in our world. And it might be something worth us thinking about as we go to message. Maybe we do need to be a little bit gentler about putting forward, really strong messaging of worst case scenario things, and try to do everything we can from the way we evoke emotion by speaking, so speak calmly and don't try to be frenetic, all the way to the attributes of the information we're sharing, just really try to be transparent about what's very likely. Don't just sit on the pedal of this is the worst case scenario messaging. We just might really want to think about being careful with people who are very, very, very risk exhausted.
I feel bad
very
for
wise words.
Yeah.
I feel bad for the people in the media business who have to be on social media to do their job, because I tell you what, my life is wonderful. I'm not on any social media. I'm not on Facebook. I don't even have a LinkedIn page. And so I honestly, I don't know a lot of what you're talking about. And and I'm kind of happy. I feel a little bit out of the loop, but I feel like the pandemic kicked in. People were locked down. Everyone just went and spent 2 years on their computer getting themselves riled up. And this is what you get. Go outside, people. Enjoy the nature. Get off your computer.
Outside into the hurricane. It'll be great. Especially if you're in Tampa, just take a nice walk.
It'll probably be less stressful than checking Twitter.
Probably so.
Bingo.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. That was good. And I think there's so many things that we could talk about on future shows about this type of topic. But, just I've never met more caring people than the people on this panel for what they do and how much they care about the people that they reach for weather. And I think that's all we can do is just try to be a light in the darkness to try to share that message and try to help people. That's what we do. And we genuinely mean what we say. We're not trying to hype anything. We're not trying to hold stuff back. It's not a big secret. We're trying to tell you what we know based on our experience. So thank you so much, Stephen, for sending the email. And if you would like to send emails to us, whether they are Twitter trails from Cat Turd or, just other riddles or jokes or, comments about the show ideas, email at weatherbrains.com. Back to you, Jade.
I'm afraid Chad's going to hang up on us. Chad, are you still hanging in there?
I love the conversation.
I figured Chad would be halfway to Greenwood by now. He'd be gone. He'd be in the North Mississippi by now.
Oh yeah,
Did anyone see the DART mission live where they flew the spacecraft into the asteroid? That was so cool because it was 38 seconds delayed because of the time that it takes for it to get back to Earth. But that they flew, you could see the rocks on the surface of this asteroid as that spacecraft came in real time, which was just amazing to me. So something else. I was lucky enough to know about it and watch it on NASA television. And I think that's a really exciting mission that they've completed there.
I thought Bruce Willis blew that thing up. All right, so we're kind of running long here. Let's kind of roll over to picks of the week. This is where everybody shares something that is cool and weather related. And there's a lot of cameras around. I just picked my favorite camera that I use for Tampa Bay. That's my pick of the week. And a lot of people like to watch the cams as tropical systems come in. And again, that'll be my pick. Of course, there'll be assorted, news people. I know that, there's probably 1,000 blow-dried boobs on the coast right now waiting to go live on the late news this evening. We've got some down there, and you can, of course, watch them. But the unmanned cams are pretty cool, too. So that's my pick of the week. All right, so let's start with Kim, who has been our voice of reason for this evening. Kim, do you have a pick of the week for us?
I do. Come back to me. I was trying to remember what my first one was because I added a second today. I remember what it was. It was a graphic from Tomer Berg, who is a PhD candidate here at OU, and he makes remarkable data visualizations of really complex meteorological information. And he's been sharing some really, really neat ones about the potential futures that Ian could have. And I've just really enjoyed his visuals. One of the things that is so great about what he's doing is he is building storylines into a single individual graphic. So there are a lot of people who are creating little videos you can watch where people walk through scenarios, and that's wonderful, and absolutely keep doing that. But we also recognize that on social media, especially, you need to share a lot through single graphics because that is what gets the widest dissemination. And while what he's creating is maybe a little data dense for just ordinary Joe Q public, for the people who are weather translators in their communities, their families, their friend groups, this is probably spot on. And he does this great job of breaking things into storylines visually. So I recommend his stuff. And then following on from that, I just had a story about the sort of folk science of Tampa as the hurricane is approaching that area and possibly will affect the Tampa area. I'm very fascinated by how people who are embedded in local places make sense of environmental threats, especially those that are moving toward their location or that could miss them. And this is something I've explored for tornadoes a lot. Rick and I have worked together on some of that for central Oklahoma, but it's fascinating to see how across hazards, some places there are people who just feel really invulnerable. And in Tampa, they have a very strong sort of folk science that suggests that they've been missed for all these, for like a century now, and they will therefore continue to be missed. You have to admire the local people in part that they're so attentive to the local climatology, and also worry that they are making inferences about the why that are guided more by psychology than by anything that we would come up with in the meteorological community. So that's my second pick of the week. I'll do a twofer this week.
Twofers are good. Awesome. Let's go to James A. before he goes on television on Fox 23 News at 9:00. James, what you got?
Well, I'm in honor of Chad. I have a tweet where he was cited in 2017 real time as I was watching on GR2 Analyst Edition, the August 2017 tornado near Reform, Alabama. And again, was able to say, hey, that TDS height is this high. According to Lamb and Intremont, that's probably about EF2/EF3 strength. And I think it ended up being an EF3 tornado. I'm not totally sure, but plus the ridiculousness of an August tornado in Alabama, that part of the country too. But yeah, thanks for that. I was not APA format, so I probably lost a couple of points in class for that.
Thank you for calling it Reform.
Hey, I'm a
That's
slow
right.
learner, but I got that one.
Yeah, Chad, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I think that was a tropical remnant tornado event that time.
Yeah. If we have them in August, if they're in August, it's it's something related to tropics. So absolutely.
Run a blank.
All right.
All
right.
17.
All right. Let's go to Rick Smith. Rick, what you got for us? Go.
My pick of the week, I think I emailed it like almost a week ago when I saw it. The Slidell, New Orleans forecast office put out a series of graphics talking about the anxiety that people are feeling. And they got a really good graphic that I will be stealing for tornadoes about what details can you reasonably expect from a hurricane forecast this far out. And they've got 7+ days, 5 to 7, 3 to 5. And, in that 7+ days is where we were at the time. It's just giving people an idea of what they should be thinking or doing. This may or may not have been in any way related to a large national weather forecasting group that had put out a very specific graphic almost a week in advance. But anyway, no more comment on that. But anyway, I really love the graphics. I really love the post, and it is in my to steal later folder. So it's a good tweet.
Yeah, no, those were very well done. In fact, I borrowed some of them for use. They were so well done. All right, let's go to Troy. Troy, what you got for us this week? Go.
Well, I got another cam, I guess, along with James there in Birmingham from Key West Marina tonight. And I've had it up in this monitor over here all night and watching the rain showers pass. And they've got another heavy one coming up on the marina now. But I guess my pick of the week, James, in a very serious note, is the people of Florida for the next few days. Our thoughts are with you. I'm hoping people will make critical thinking type decisions and do what the National Weather Service tells you to do what your emergency managers tell you to do, and we'll all get through this, but the next few days may be difficult for a lot of people. So I give my pick of the week to the people of Florida. They will make good decisions, and we'll hope for the best.
Yep. And I wanted to shout out to the family members that keep other family members in the loop. A lot of people just don't pay attention to weather. And I've learned that most families have one weather weenie. they are great about informing their family members and friends about what's happening, and they do it in a very responsible way, and they're an integral part of this whole process. But yeah,
I learned what the term is now, James. They're weather translators, according to Dr. Kim.
there you go. They're an integral part of the process. All right, Neil, what you got for us? Go.
So I'm gonna do a pick of the week that I had picked out actually for last week, and that is the Ocean Service, basically information on how to recognize and get yourself out of a rip current. You would be amazed at how many people die each year from rip currents, and the Fiona swell was no exception. And my second pick of the week is an article by Surfline, because I was there on Thursday when the swell was at its peak. The waves were phenomenal for about the first 3 hours until I got thrown right into about a foot deep sandbar from an 8-foot wave. I have a dislocated elbow, which is on the same unfortunate arm that the spiders attacked. So, but there's great coverage of it, and believe it or not, I did not come close to sustaining the worst injuries. There was someone with a broken shoulder and someone else who lost some teeth. So it was a phenomenal day of really good waves in North Carolina last Thursday.
Woo! Goodness gracious! All right, and again, all these picks will be up on WeatherBrains.com. Jen, what you got for us this week? Go.
I don't know how I can follow that.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
You're the most well-rounded person I've ever met. It's amazing. No, the reason I am a weather geek is because of the tropics, and so being able to follow Mark has been awesome. To watch his tracks and all that. And so my pick of the week is actually a great document that talks about his whole project. Why does he do this? It's his hurricane landfall project, and so it's a document about that. And just check it out. It's really neat, and I support what he does. I will be glued to every camera for the. Somebody said something in the chat.
Oh yeah. So, you can tell when it goes down the tubes. Yeah.
Exactly.
God bless you, Neil. Yeah,
that's right. Anyway, I will pass it back.
Sorry, Jen.
That's totally
somehow
fine.
we're losing control here. Chad, let me give the floor over to you before this thing self-destructs. So, Chad, give us a good pick of the week. I know you got one. Go.
Oh, I didn't know I had to give one.
Nobody warned you. Sorry.
What we can do is we can let Bill go. Let's let Bill go, and then we'll give you a good. But Bill, stall for a minute. So go, Bill. Go.
Yeah, this is the part, Chad, of the show where everybody comes up with a pick of the week. It can be a news article, a journal, an application, whatever. So work on that. Since you got such poor leadership earlier today. Yeah, I don't have a pick, James. So I'd like to hear the foghorn.
Oh wow! Well, okay, we'll just blow that.
You should always be ready with that foghorn. But I do. Know. It's very propitious that next week's guest is Rich Fields from WTSP in Tampa. Wow. When we booked that several weeks ago, we had no idea. Of course, we'd be dealing with a hurricane, and hopefully Tampa will make it through this as unscathed as possible. But it looks really, really bad. So, but Rich has had an interesting career. Even was the announcer on The Price is Right.
Wow!
And so he'll be a lot of fun to talk to.
Awesome. All right. So Chad,
I didn't get to ask you a million questions. I could ask you all these other questions I had over here, but the biggest one that was concerning to me was: is the water situation in Jackson straightening out? Is that better now?
Yes, it is straightening out. The state had got some resources and did a bunch of things. And yes, it's not where it needs to be, but somewhat the crisis has been averted, so to speak. That was more dire and a real big issue. But yeah, things are on the up and up with that. So that's a really good thing.
Good.
All right. So I know that you come up with something good for us. So go.
Yeah. So the pick, right? Now,
yep.
We all know at day 10, right? There's always these crazy model graphics of about a hurricane is going to impact whatever part of the Gulf Coast at 10 days. So we can just pick one of those. Disclaimer, however we want to say it, just folks, you got to be responsible. You can't put that stuff out there. Don't believe those kind of forecasts. That just really, kind of eats at a lot of credibility. And really, for days on end, after that stuff starts to come out, 10 days out, look how much cleanup we all have to do in terms of trying to just remove that message that gets out there. It's amazing how that really sticks that far out, but it does, because we're all trying to, rumor control and eliminate that initial message. So we can put one of them with a big disclaimer.
Amen, brother.
Yeah, get rid of those knuckleheads. All right, so I guess that's a wrap here. We've hit the time limit here. We are 2 hours in. Chad, thanks a lot for being on the show. Have you got a Twitter, Gram, Facebag, anything you want to promote? Personal stuff?
Not really. I got a Twitter handle, but not very active. Kind of like Dr. Jacobs. There's so much crazy stuff out there. I got too many things, too many kids in my life to be handling and dealing with. So I keep low key.
Yeah, low key is good. Well, thanks a lot for being on the show. I'm telling you, every time I get on the Twitter or the Talk or the Gram or the Facebag, my IQ drops about 3 points, and I don't have a lot of IQ points to give away like some on this show here. So, but anyway,
James,
we got to go.
James,
yes.
Real quick, I just thought I would tell you, since Bill had mentioned this, just got a tweet. Tampa International Airport has just sent a message out that says Tampa to suspend operations in preparation for Hurricane Ian. Tampa will suspend all operations at 5 p.m. tomorrow. The airport will be closed to all visitors at that time, and they've issued a press release. Oh,
wow.
Yep.
Fly TPA is their Twitter handle there. How about that? Great information. So, all right. So listen, for those that are new here, we're typically on the air every Monday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central on the WeatherBrains YouTube channel, youtube.com/WeatherBrains. We know that most of you listen to this show, and we're glad you do that, whether you watch or listen. If you'd like to get in touch with us, our email address here, it's email@weatherbrains.com. And all the show notes tonight, all the picks of the week and all the links we mentioned will be up on weatherbrains.com. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks a lot for listening. Have a marvelous week and God bless.
Thanks for making it a fun show, Chad.
Thanks,
Chad.
Chad.
Thank you. This is great show. Great show, everybody.
Be safe, Neil.